Imagine stepping into a courtroom where every tick of the clock seems to echo with secrets and lost promises, a place where the sterile walls have witnessed moments of profound human vulnerability and unspoken truths. Picture a moment when the atmosphere is thick with tension, and the air vibrates with the collective heartbeat of those who have gathered to witness a drama that defies expectation. Today, you are invited into a world where a trial is not merely a clash of legal arguments, but a battleground of past and present, where one fateful day has the power to shatter old bonds and ignite new sparks of hope. In this courtroom, the spotlight falls not just on the case at hand, but on the man at its center, a man whose life is a tangled web of lost dreams and desperate resilience. His name is Carter Monroe, and he stands accused of a crime that might seem all too familiar in our society's relentless pursuit of justice. But as you listen, you will come to realize that his story is not just about guilt or innocence, it's about the invisible lines that divide us, the unspoken biases that taint our judgments, and the haunting memories of a friendship that once defied all odds. How did a boy, full of promise and untamed hope, become the man now ensnared in a web of circumstantial evidence? And more importantly, can the truth ever be as simple as the evidence laid out before you? The air in the courtroom is charged with anticipation. Every eye is fixed on the proceedings, every whisper holds the weight of past regrets, and every pause in the dialogue begs the question, what truly lies beneath the surface of this case? You will soon discover that behind the rigid facade of legal testimony and circumstantial proof, there is a deeper, more personal story, a story that connects the lives of Judge Alexandria Reyes and Carter Monroe in ways that are as unexpected as they are heart-wrenching. Could it be that a long-buried friendship, once thought to be lost to the cruel hands of fate, might still offer a glimmer of hope for redemption? As the trial unfolds, secrets long kept in the recesses of memory begin to rise like ghosts in the dim light of the courtroom. Witnesses recall fragments of a shared past, a series of innocent encounters beneath the shade of ancient trees, a time when promises were made in hushed tones, and trust was as natural as breathing. But now, every word spoken, every piece of evidence presented, adds a layer of complexity to a case that is anything but black and white. What hidden truths will be revealed, and a mysterious witness steps forward with an account that challenges everything you thought you knew about Carter's whereabouts on that fateful night? And how will these revelations reshape the narrative of a life marred by misunderstanding and misfortune? In this trial, nothing is as it seems. The prosecution builds its case on a foundation of circumstantial evidence, while the defense weaves a counter-narrative that is as compelling as it is uncertain. You will be drawn into a labyrinth of conflicting testimonies, unexpected twists, and ethical dilemmas that will leave you questioning the very nature of justice. What happens when the scales of justice are tipped by the weight of personal history? Can one man's struggle to reclaim his identity challenge an entire system built on assumptions and half-truths? Stay with us as we journey into the heart of this courtroom drama, where every moment is charged with the possibility of revelation and every question posed is a call to uncover the deeper layers of truth. What is the real story behind Carter Monroe's plight, and can a shattered past ever be mended by the promise of a new beginning? Let these questions simmer in your mind as the story unfolds, a tale where the echoes of yesterday collide with the harsh realities of today, and the path to redemption is paved with both regret and hope. The courtroom buzzed with a familiar mix of tension and anticipation. Lawyers flipped through their meticulously prepared notes, and the low murmur of onlookers filled the spacious chamber, a chorus punctuated by the steady, measured toll of a distant courthouse bell. At the center of this charged environment sat Judge Alexandria Reyes, a figure renowned for her unyielding fairness and resolute professionalism. Today, she was set to preside over the case of the state of Louisiana versus Carter Monroe. Judge Reyes's eyes, calm yet piercing, scanned the case docket before her. The charges were grave: assault, robbery, and resisting arrest. But for Alexandria, this case carried a personal weight that went far beyond legal definitions. The defendant brought into the courtroom in cold, heavy handcuffs and shackles was none other than Carter, the very Carter she had known as a mischievous, determined boy from her own childhood in Hammond, Louisiana. The memory of long summer afternoons, racing bicycles along dusty streets and sharing whispered secrets under a sprawling magnolia tree, surged back with painful clarity. For a moment, the unyielding facade of Judge Reyes faltered. The courtroom, usually a realm of strict order, seemed to shrink around her as the familiar face of Carter, marred by the harsh realities of life, confronted her from across the room. His shoulders slumped beneath the burden of years of hardship, and deep lines of sorrow marred his once bright features. Yet, despite the toll of life's struggles, those eyes dark, soulful, and achingly familiar sparked memories of a boy full of promise and hope. Case number: The State of Louisiana versus Carter Monroe, intoned the bailiff. With measured determination, Judge Reyes leaned forward, her hands poised on the polished oak bench. "Mr. Monroe, you stand charged with assault and robbery. How do you plead?" Carter's voice emerged, rough and heavy with years of struggle. "Not guilty, Your Honor." In that singular moment, Alexandria's heart clenched. A storm of memories and unspoken questions raged within her. How had the brilliant, kind-hearted boy of yesterday been reduced to this broken figure standing before her? Yet, bound by duty and the solemn oath of impartiality, she replied, "Proceed." As the prosecutor began his opening statements, Judge Reyes found herself drifting back through a time when the world was simpler, and the rules of society had not yet hardened into the barriers that now divided them. She remembered how she and Carter had grown up on opposite sides of Hammond, a town where invisible lines marked the difference between privilege and struggle. Her own family's modest, white-fenced home contrasted sharply with the dilapidated house on a dirt road where Carter's family lived, surrounded by expansive fields and whispered hardships. Their friendship, forged in defiance of the unspoken boundaries of their segregated town, was a secret rebellion, a declaration that kindness and shared dreams could overcome even the strictest societal rules. She recalled the fateful day they first met, a day marked by an unexpected encounter at the edge of a bubbling creek. While she had wandered further than she should have from her home, Carter was quietly fishing, his line dancing lazily with the current. A simple twist of fate, her hand inadvertently snagging his fishing line, sparked a conversation that quickly evolved into a bond built on mutual understanding and hope. "Do you ever think about leaving this place?" Carter had asked with a glint in his eye. "About finding a world where people don't judge you just for being who you are." Back then, her laughter had been light, and the notion seemed whimsical. But even as a child, Carter possessed a keen insight into a world that, even then, offered little promise to someone born into his reality. Their friendship blossomed amid secret adventures and hushed conversations under starlit skies. They defied disapproving glances, sidestepping the warnings and prejudices that threatened to keep them apart. Then, one summer afternoon just before the trials of adolescence cast long shadows on their lives, a bitter intervention shattered their newfound closeness. While sitting together on the porch of her family home, the cold, authoritative voice of her father rang out, "Alexandria, come inside now." The command was delivered with an edge of finality that instantly divided their worlds. Carter, frozen in disbelief, could only murmur a quiet, "Go on," before retreating into the growing distance between them. That moment marked the abrupt end of a friendship that had been both precious and rebellious. In the painful aftermath, Alexandria was forbidden from ever seeing Carter again. His family soon left Hammond, leaving behind only the bittersweet memory of a connection that had defied convention. Yet, despite the years that passed and the personal sacrifices she made to forge a career in law, the image of Carter, a beacon of resilience amidst adversity, remained etched in her heart. Driven by the desire to right the systemic wrongs that had torn them apart, Alexandria dedicated herself to the pursuit of justice, climbing the ranks until she now sat as Judge Reyes, a guardian of the law, but also a reluctant keeper of a cherished past. Now, as she faced Carter in a courtroom that was both a stage for justice and a silent witness to a long-buried friendship, the weight of the moment was almost unbearable. Carter's criminal record, dotted with minor infractions like petty theft and loitering, was a mere glimpse into a life systematically undermined by forces beyond his control. The prosecutor detailed how, on the fateful night in question, Carter had allegedly assaulted a store clerk during a robbery at a convenience store in Baton Rouge, leaving the clerk with minor injuries and the cash register's contents missing. The circumstantial nature of the evidence only deepened the complexity of the case. Carter had been apprehended just blocks from the scene, and despite the physical evidence, the question remained, was this truly the same Carter she had once known? As the prosecutor's words echoed in the silent chamber, Judge Reyes couldn't help but study Carter's demeanor. His posture was a mix of resignation and defiance, his hands clasped tightly as if to contain the turmoil within. Was it possible that the man before her was not the same young soul who had once shared dreams of escaping the confines of Hammond? Or was the harsh hand of fate responsible for transforming him into someone unrecognizable? The trial was momentarily adjourned for a lunch break, offering Alexandria a brief respite from the relentless barrage of memories and legal technicalities. In the quiet solitude of her chambers, her assistant, Celia, approached with genuine concern. "Judge Reyes, are you all right? You seemed a bit lost in thought." For an instant, Alexandria contemplated divulging the deeply personal conflict raging within her, but the demands of her position held her back. "I'm fine, Celia. Just a lot on my mind," she replied, her voice betraying none of the internal strife. In truth, she was anything but fine. The memories of a lost friendship had surged forth, mingling with the duty of her office and threatening to blur the lines of justice. When the proceedings resumed, the courtroom was packed. Reporters scribbled notes in the shadows, clerks shuffled documents with practiced precision, and every eye was fixed on the unfolding drama. The prosecutor, a man known as Winston Price for his stern demeanor and clinical detachment, took to the floor with a measured tone. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case centers on an act of violence. A man who, without provocation, entered a convenience store, attacked an innocent clerk, and stole the cash from the register." His words were as cold and precise as the evidence he presented. Across the room, Judge Reyes's heart pounded as she observed Carter's reaction, a slight straightening of his shoulders, a tightening of his gaze that hinted at something more than mere resignation. Then rose the defense attorney, a determined young woman named Vanessa Quinn. With a voice that commanded attention and a presence that radiated confidence, Vanessa began her opening statement. "The prosecution would have you believe that this case is as clear-cut as it appears," she declared, pacing deliberately in front of the jury. "But my client, Carter Monroe, has maintained his innocence from the very beginning. Today, we will demonstrate that the evidence brought forth is riddled with inconsistencies and that assumptions made on that fateful night do not stand up to rigorous scrutiny." Her words struck a chord in the courtroom, injecting a fragile spark of hope into Carter's weary eyes. The first witness called to the stand was a store clerk, Mr. Everett Chambers, who had been working on the night of the alleged incident. Chambers recounted, in painstaking detail, how a man allegedly matching Carter's description had stormed into the store, exchanged heated words with the cashier, and then launched a sudden, violent attack. His testimony was delivered in a manner that was both methodical and strangely rehearsed. During cross-examination, Vanessa pressed him sharply. "Mr. Chambers, you mentioned that the man you saw was wearing a red hoodie. Is that correct?" Chambers confirmed, though he hesitated before admitting that the store's dim lighting had made it difficult to discern the man's features clearly. "So, you're saying that you cannot say with absolute certainty that the assailant was Carter Monroe?" she queried. Chambers' reply, mired in uncertainty, left the jury with lingering doubts, a crack in the prosecution's narrative. At that point, the courtroom's atmosphere shifted. As Judge Reyes's gaze flickered between Carter and the witness, an unexpected figure was ushered in as a surprise witness, a peculiar man named Elias Montgomery. Elias was not on anyone's initial list. His presence, unanticipated and enigmatic, sent a ripple of murmurs through the room. With an unassuming air and a slightly disheveled appearance, Elias took the stand and cleared his throat before speaking. I wasn't sure if I should come forward," he began, his voice tentative yet sincere. "But on the night in question, I was at a small roadside diner not far from the convenience store. I remember it vividly, the neon sign buzzing outside, the soft clatter of dishes, and I saw Carter Monroe there, sitting with a group of travelers." Elias's testimony was unexpected, a stark contradiction to the prosecution's timeline. He explained how Carter had been in deep conversation with a mysterious figure whose identity he could only describe as a wandering soul seeking refuge. "They exchanged what seemed like important words," Elias recalled, "and Carter even checked his watch several times, as if ensuring he wasn't late for something vital." His testimony was delivered with a quavering intensity that hinted at its own hidden significance. Elias's unexpected account stirred the courtroom into a state of quiet disbelief. Vanessa Quinn seized the opportunity to further probe this anomaly. "Mr. Montgomery, can you describe this mysterious figure? Did you notice any distinguishing features?" she asked. Elias hesitated, then continued, "I only recall that the man wore a faded brown coat and had a weathered face, almost as if he carried the weight of many unspoken stories. They spoke in hushed tones. I couldn't make out all they said, but it was clear they were discussing something of great importance." This testimony opened a new line of inquiry. Could it be that Carter's alibi was not as fragile as it appeared? Was there a hidden detail, a clandestine meeting that could exonerate him? The jurors exchanged glances, the seed of doubt planted firmly in their minds. The introduction of Elias Montgomery as a witness not only bolstered the defense's case but also introduced an unforeseen twist. His testimony suggested that Carter, far from being a lone figure on that fateful night, had been engaged in a critical, private conversation with a stranger. This revelation compelled the prosecution to re-examine their case. They argued that Elias's account might be a case of mistaken identity or an unreliable recollection fueled by the dim light and the diner's chaos. However, the defense countered vigorously, asserting that Elias's detailed recollections provided a credible alibi for Carter, a detail that had been conspicuously absent from the prosecution's narrative. As the trial progressed, Judge Reyes found herself caught in a vortex of memories and legal complexities. Every piece of evidence, the grainy surveillance video, the hesitant testimony of Mr. Chambers, and now the extraordinary account of Elias Montgomery seemed to echo the convoluted layers of a life that defied simple explanation. Carter's alibi, once seen as a feeble excuse, now began to take shape as a potentially critical detail that might exonerate him. Yet, as always, the judge's duty was to sift through the fragments of truth and fiction, rendering a verdict based solely on the evidence at hand. The next day, with renewed tension in the courtroom, the prosecution called its next witness, a forensic expert named Dr. Malcolm Reyes, no relation to the judge who had been tasked with examining the surveillance footage from the convenience store. Dr. Reyes explained that while the video clearly depicted a figure in a red hoodie, the quality of the footage was so poor that no definitive identification could be made. He also noted a peculiar inconsistency: the timestamp on the video appeared to have been altered, an anomaly that raised serious questions about the integrity of the evidence. "It is my professional opinion," Dr. Reyes testified, "that the footage does not provide irrefutable proof that the man depicted is Carter Monroe." His testimony added another layer of uncertainty, further bolstering the defense's argument that the case was riddled with gaps. Vanessa Quinn, ever determined, then brought forth the most daring twist yet. She introduced evidence: a set of bank transaction records and digital phone data that suggested Carter had been in constant communication with the very traveler described by Elias Montgomery on the night in question. According to these records, Carter had received a text message from an unknown number just minutes before the alleged incident, a message that read simply, "Keep your promise." While the message's origin could not be immediately traced, it was clear that Carter's phone activity corroborated his claim of having been engaged in an important meeting. This evidence, though subtle, pointed to a premeditated schedule that Carter had maintained, one that could potentially prove his whereabouts away from the scene of the crime. As the layers of the case were peeled back, Judge Reyes felt the crushing weight of conflicting loyalties and memories. Here was Carter Monroe, a man with a past interwoven with her own, and now a trail of evidence suggesting that his alibi was not a mere fabrication but a carefully constructed shield against a night that could have otherwise defined his fate. Yet, every piece of evidence also reminded her of the childhood promise they once made, a promise to always stand by each other, regardless of the world's harsh judgments. The courtroom's atmosphere grew even more charged as the trial entered its final stages. The closing arguments were delivered with fervor. Prosecutor Winston Price reiterated his argument, leaning on the circumstantial evidence and the seemingly unassailable timeline of events. "This case is not merely about a mistake, it's about a calculated act of violence that resulted in the harm of an innocent clerk," he insisted, his tone unyielding. "We ask you to trust the integrity of the evidence and the rigor of our investigation." In contrast, Vanessa Quinn's final plea was a masterful appeal to both logic and empathy. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what you have heard over the past few days is a tapestry woven with threads of uncertainty and hidden truths," she declared, her voice resonating in the hushed courtroom. "Carter Monroe is not the villain you have been led to believe. The testimony of Mr. Montgomery, the discrepancies in the surveillance footage, and the undeniable digital trail all point to a man caught in the snares of a system that has too readily judged him on appearances alone. Ask yourselves, can you condemn a man whose only fault may be the circumstances of his birth and the harsh judgments of society?" Her words, both impassioned and deliberate, challenged the jurors to look beyond the surface and consider the human story behind the evidence. Finally, the day arrived when the jury was to deliberate. The tension in the courtroom was palpable, the air thick with anticipation and uncertainty. Judge Reyes, though burdened by the personal memories that haunted her, maintained her stoic professionalism as the jury retreated to their deliberation room. Hours passed in an agonizing silence, during which every spectator, every participant, felt the weight of an impending decision that would reshape lives. When the jury finally returned, their faces etched with the strain of a decision that carried enormous consequences, Judge Reyes's hands trembled ever so slightly as she received the verdict slip. With measured calm, she announced, "In the case of the state of Louisiana versus Carter Monroe, we find the defendant." A pregnant pause enveloped the courtroom, each second stretching into an eternity. "Not guilty." In that single, resonant moment, the room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, and even subdued cheers reverberated through the chamber. Carter's shoulders relaxed visibly, as if a monumental burden had been lifted from him, yet his expression remained inscrutable, a blend of relief, sorrow, and a lingering hardness born from years of hardship. After the announcement, Judge Reyes addressed Carter directly, her voice low and resolute. "Mr. Monroe, the jury has rendered its decision. You are free to go." As the courtroom slowly emptied, the echo of the verdict mingled with the subdued murmurs of those still processing the events of the trial. Celia and a few remaining clerks busied themselves with the final administrative tasks, yet the profound impact of the proceedings lingered in every silent corner. Before Carter was led away, he approached the bench. His eyes, meeting Judge Reyes' for the first time since the trial began, conveyed a silent mix of gratitude and anguish. "You never offered an explanation," he said softly, his voice laden with the weight of years lost and promises broken. "Why did you let our past remain hidden, even when I needed you the most?" His question was raw and unfiltered, a challenge not only to the judge but to the very system that had once forced them apart. Judge Reyes' throat tightened as she struggled to articulate the conflict that had tormented her throughout the trial. "Carter," she began, her tone heavy with regret, "I was bound by the oath of impartiality. To speak of our past, however dear it might be, would have compromised the integrity of these proceedings and, ultimately, the justice that must be served." Her words, though measured, carried the sorrow of lost opportunities. "I wish I could have reached out to you as the girl who once cherished our friendship, but duty demanded that I remain detached. I am sorry that our shared past could not guide me to protect you in the way you needed." A long silence followed, filled only by the soft shuffling of papers and the distant murmur of footsteps in the corridor. Then, in a moment that seemed suspended in time, Carter's gaze softened. "Is it possible," he murmured, "that we might find a way to rebuild what we lost? Or has the weight of our past shattered everything beyond repair?" His question, an echo of a childhood promise, hung in the air as if challenging fate itself. In that charged silence, Judge Reyes' mind raced back to the innocent days of youth, the secret rendezvous by the creek, the whispered hopes under starlight, the unspoken vow to always be there for one another. But now, the courtroom and the harsh realities of adulthood threatened to overshadow that tender promise. The trial had laid bare not only the deficiencies of a rigid legal system but also the deep, personal scars that time and circumstance had inflicted upon both of them. As the courthouse slowly emptied and the last vestiges of the day's intensity began to fade, Judge Reyes remained alone at the bench. The fading light of dusk painted long, somber shadows across the polished wood, and in that quiet moment, she made a silent vow. "I cannot change the past," she thought, "but I will strive to ensure that the future is not dictated solely by the harshness of our judgments. Justice must be more than rigid rules, it must embrace compassion, understanding, and the possibility of redemption." Outside the courtroom, as the cool evening air mingled with the soft sounds of the city, Carter was escorted to a waiting vehicle. His eyes remained fixed on the imposing courthouse, as if seeking answers in its austere stone walls. The mystery of that long-forgotten friendship, the unexpected testimony of Elias Montgomery, and the revelations that had turned the case on its head all converged in a moment of profound uncertainty, a moment that left both him and Judge Reyes questioning the true nature of justice. Before the day's final departure, the judge lingered at the door, her gaze fixed on the path Carter had taken. In that lingering moment of reflection, she couldn't help but wonder, could two souls, torn apart by circumstance and duty, ever find their way back to the bond they once cherished? The memory of their shared past, of whispered dreams and silent promises, continued to pulse within her, a gentle reminder that sometimes, even in the depths of heartbreak, hope might yet flicker. As we draw this intense and twist-laden trial to a close, ask yourself, can Judge Alexandria Reyes and Carter Monroe rebuild the friendship they once shared, or has the relentless passage of time and the scars of a fractured past rendered reconciliation impossible? What if every twist in our lives holds the promise of a second chance if we dare to trust in the possibility of redemption? Thank you for joining us on this journey through a courtroom drama that challenges not only the rigid boundaries of the law but also the resilience of the human spirit. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know, is there hope for rebuilding a friendship that once seemed unbreakable? And what would you do if you were in their shoes? Stay tuned for our next video as we explore the unfolding aftermath of this case and the mysterious paths that lead us to unexpected redemption.